What's going on, guys? Rybomby Teacher in the house, and I'm here with the GPL Week 8 Team Builder. Your Royal Bomber for Bombies are taking on the Miami Sylveons and Coach Sylvie, who's in a bit of a rough patch at the moment. 2 back-to-back 6-0 losses, definitely not doing him any favours. I've never played him though before. He is a returning member from last season though. He didn't make playoffs. Tends to be a little bit one-dimensional with his team builds. He tends to change only 1 or 2 Pokemon each week if he changes anything. He did have a spell where he brought the same team for about 3 weeks in a row. So unless he does anything completely surprising, anything completely different, I wouldn't be at all surprised if he brings any one of the first 8 Pokemon on his team that we're going to talk about. The last 3 Pokemon he's not actually used at all yet. Although I do think there is a chance that one of them does get used, but we'll talk about that as we get there. So, first up is his Mega Latios, pretty much his main endgame carry. He tends to use a Carmine Sweeper set with it. A little bit easy to play against though. It is a relatively mixed attacker. It's got a good solid physical attack as well as that 160 special attack, of course. An okay speed here at 110 speed and pretty okay bulk with 120 SPDF and 100 defense. Does struggle a little bit for pace if I run Choice Scarfers. Mega Arrow, of course, is naturally faster and can easily pack coverage moves to hit it like a truck. So, I think Mega Latios has an interesting matchup this week. I do think it comes, but I do have very good answers for it if he does attempt to bring it. So, we will see what he goes for. Next up is, of course, my baby, of course, my mascot, Rybomby. Mod I love so much. Sylvie hasn't really used Rybomby very well all season. He tends to just run a Sash lead set for Sticky Webs. I don't think Sticky Webs comes this week against me because his team is naturally faster than mine, so I don't think he really needs Webs. The only thing that he might potentially want Webs for is any particular Scarfers like my Galvantula. I have run Scarf Galvantula a couple of times this season, but things like my Hydreigon, which I can Scarf, is levitating, so it doesn't actually get hit by Webs. So Webs is kind of not that great, but still a Quividance Sweeper set. If Rybomby gets to +1, it does outspeed my whole team, so that is something I do need to bear in mind. Next up is his Mew, one of his Z-Captains, pretty much the only Z-Captain he's used. Very versatile Pokemon, but Sylvie tends to have a bit of a tendency to run Z Metronome, which, while it is amusing, it often lets him down more than it actually helps him. I can have a pretty hard time against my team. I do have a potential Scarf Hydreigon coming. I do have priority access as well in some of my mons, and some of my other mons carry good coverage options, and even Galvantula has Bug Buzz, which hits it like an absolute truck, unless it's fully SPDF. Which I don't see coming. My team does have good special offense, but it's got much better physical, so I expect him to worry about that. Mew is, of course, a good Infernape answer alongside the Rybomby and the Mega Latios. And also alongside that is Keldeo. Keldeo, very, very strong special breaker. It's a bit of a theme with Sylvie's team. He's got a very specially offensive setup, which is something else I'm also going to be able to look to punish. Decent wall breaker, of course, typically runs Calm Mind or Specs. Could also be a very good Z-move user, however, Keldeo is not one of his Z-Captains, so unfortunately that's no longer an option. I haven't seen too much of how he's used Keldeo throughout the season, because most of the time when it comes in, it's already against a setup opponent and dying, so I don't see too much of what he's done with Keldeo. I do imagine it's more likely to be a Calm Mind set. But it doesn't really put much of a dent into things like my Florges or my Cresselia, which generally matches up very well against Keldeo. So we will see what he opts for with that. Also, Galvantula can take it on relatively well if I run a Scarf set. Next up is the Cantonian Ninetales. I'm not really sure why Sylvie brings this a lot, but Sylvie's been bringing it quite a lot this season. It's not really done much. Obviously, it's a lot weaker than its Alolan counterpart. Alolan Ninetales is generally considered very strong in Draft League format. Cantonian Ninetales, not really. Like, yes, Ninetales gets Drought, which is also pretty nice for his Lilligant on his team, but without a nasty plot, Ninetales doesn't really do a lot of damage. It also is incredibly lacking on HP and physical bulk, so it can easily get punished by things like my Mega Aerodactyl. I don't really see Ninetales coming this week. I think it's got a terrible matchup into me in general, so I don't ever see a world where it comes. And I do think there is one that he hasn't brought as often that will come in its place. It is worth noting, actually, while we're talking about this, that on the top row of the Teambuilder is the ones that Sylvie's brought the most this season. It's not necessarily the team of 6 that I think he's going to bring, but I haven't seen enough of some of his other mons to be able to know if he would bring anything else. Next up is Togekiss, typically run with a Scarf by Sylvie this season. Scarf Togekiss does have the potential to outspeed my Mega Aero if I'm not running max speed. Things like that. Typically a decent special offense mod, and it does get good coverage moves and things like Aura Sphere Flamethrower, things like that. Sylvie has actually even run a Super Luck set and tried to aim for crits. I do expect another Scarf set. The smarter move might actually be to build a more defensive set this week. He doesn't have a lot of good defensive options on his team. That's something else to bear in mind. He might run like a bold, fully Fizz Death Togekiss to try and take on things like my Arrow a little better. Doesn't take it on too well though, and that does suffer against Galvantula a little bit, so I'll be interested to see what he opts for. Next up is the mon I think he's likely to bring instead of Ninetales, is that Landorus Incarnate. One of the few physically offensive monsters on Sylvie's team. This thing hits incredibly hard. Now, the downside to Lando I this in Draft League is it doesn't get access to its regular Sheer Force ability, which is what it uses in Uber's tier. They only get Sand Force, which does mean the damage is dropped quite a bit. But you can Scarf it to outspeed my Aero pretty easily. And it is very, very strong. Can be special as well. It does have a good special attack stat. It is quad weak to Ice though. And you'll see on my team I do have quite a bit of ice coverage this week, because I do expect Lando I to come. So I am packing a fair bit of ice, and his team doesn't really like ice type moves in general. So packing ice coverage is definitely worth it for me in this matchup. Next up is Ditto. Ditto made its debut for Sylvie last week. Not really that impressed with it. Typically it's very one-dimensional. It just runs a Choice Scarf set with Imposter, just to basically scout out opponent's sets. It does only speed tie with opposing Scarfers, and it can't copy them on behind a substitute. Spoiler alert, I'm not actually bringing sub this week. I didn't see the need for it, as I don't think Ditto really comes. If Ditto does come, it can be a counter sweeper, but against some of my team, it doesn't really counter team themselves very well. A lot of the mons I have are not really weak to themselves. There's only a couple of mons on my team that do have sets that are weak to themselves, but not really that many, and even with them I can pivot out of them into counter matchups. So I don't think Ditto comes, but if it does come, it's gonna be pretty easy for me to handle. Next up is one of these last 3 mons are the 3 that he's not used all season so far. The one I think is most likely to come is Jolteon. Jolteon is really surprising to see it unused on his team. It's a very, very fast mon at 130 base speed. Only a little bit slower than my Mega Aero, but if he runs a Quick Feet set or a Choice Scarf set, he outspeeds Aero, guaranteed. Can be a little bit one-dimensional. Typically, it just runs Volt Switch, Thunderbolt or Discharge, Shadow Ball, and Hidden Power Ice. Potentially Signal Beam is its other coverage option. Doesn't really get a lot of other coverage, so it is a little bit one-dimensional, but it's fast and it's a really good pivot. It's better than Galvantula if he's not running, or if I'm not running Scarf. So, and this is also really the only mon on his team that's fast, that's affected by sticky webs. A lot of his other faster mons are levitating, so webs doesn't really make much of a difference against his team, which is something to bear in mind. Really good mon. I'm be very surprised to not see it. I'll be annoyed to see it, of course. It's a really hard mon to deal with, but I do have good special walls, so hopefully between them we can fix it up to make it work. Next up is Lilligant. Lilligant's an unused Z-Captain for Sylvie, and I'm not really surprised. Lilligant outside of Sun is pretty weak. It's really slow, doesn't really offer that much of a threat. Got a really bad matchup into my team as well, so I don't see Lilligant ever coming. Obviously, it gets hard countered by Infernape, so that's something that he will have to worry about. Infernape I've used almost every week this season. I think this is actually the first week Infernape's not coming. I'm actually going to check that real quick. I'm just going to look at my doc. Pretty sure Infernape's come to every match. Yep, it's the only mon that's come to every match so far. But yeah, we are going to potentially see him not bring it. I do expect him not to bring it. If he does bring Ninetales, I wouldn't be too surprised if he tries to bring Lilligant as well. But I don't see either coming personally. And last but by no means least is Samurott. It's his other Z captain. Not really much of a surprise to not see it. It's got decent attack and special attack stat. Typically it's seen with a Sword Stance Aqua Jet stat, but it's got an absolutely garbage speed tier and it lacks in bulk, which means that it can't really take a hit at all before setting up. So that's something else to bear in mind. Obviously the Aqua Jet priority is a bit annoying, but it doesn't really hit that much of my team outside of Infernape and Aero, so I don't think Samurott really has much of a good matchup this week. I have Galvantula that hard outspeeds it and pretty much one-shots it every single time, so... Excuse me. Right. In terms of hazards, removal, and clerics, he doesn't actually have a lot of hazards himself, but he has a lot of removal and clerics on his team. So he only has one Stealth Rocker in the form of that Mew, he has no spikes or toxic spikes, he has one Web Setter in Ribombee, he has 4 Defoggers in Megaladios, Mew, Togekiss, and Ribombee, he has no Spinners. He has multiple different clerics. He's got Lilligants with Heal Bell and Aromatherapy. Ribombee has Aromatherapy, and Jolteon, Mew, and Togekiss also have Heal Bell. So, quite a lot to go with there. But let's talk about my team. So, I brought a few rather interesting and different sets to what I normally bring this week. First up is gonna be Hydreigon, of course. Running Scarf again, and I know people meme on me, oh, the guy always runs Scarf Hydreigon. But up until now, I've been running Special Scarf. This time I'm actually running Physical Scarf. Now, the reason I'm running Physical Scarf this week is because a lot of his mons that Hydreigon can hit really hard have a lot worse physical defense than special defense. So by running Hydreigon Physical, I can actually hit the opposing mons a little bit harder. Crunch hits the Mega Lati like a truck, it also hits the Mew really hard. Can potentially hit a couple of other mons, but that's what it's mainly there for. Outrage is mostly there for Mega Latios. It also can put in a little bit of work against some of the other mons on his team with neutral damage. Ice Fang hits the Lati, but it also hits things like the Togekiss and the Lando Eye really hard. And you turn the pivot out of anything that Hydreigon doesn't really want to be in against, particularly things like the Togekiss. Pretty solid pivot, really good offensive pivot this week. Really like Hydreigon in this matchup. So hopefully I can use it to put in work. I was kind of disappointed with how I used it in previous matches, but yeah. Next up is going to be a more familiar face to my team, of course. It's Pteranodon, the Mega Aero. Typically just Wall Breaker set. 212 speed Jolly Nature is enough speed to outspeed a Choice Scarf Togekiss. The rest of the EVs that are unused are just put in HP just to give me a little bit of additional bulk. This thing hits most of his team pretty hard. The only thing this doesn't really hit is Keldeo, but I hit everything else. So this thing's job's just to come in and click buttons and threaten something out. That's pretty much this thing's job. Does hit really hard, of course, as I am running max attack. Pretty strong, pretty good breaker. Does suffer a little bit to priority though, so it's something I do need to bear in mind when I'm using it. But yeah. Next up is gonna be Aragog the Galvantula. Now, I originally had Focus Sash on this with Sticky Webs, but then I realized that most of its faster Pokemon are levitating, so Webs actually doesn't do much. So I went back to the Choice Scarf set that I've been running consistently for the last few weeks. I really like Scarf Spooder, I think it's actually very strong. Giga Drain hits the Keldeo really hard, of course. Volt Switch to pivot out. Bug Buzz hits the Mew and the Latios, and Hidden Power Ice hits things like the Togekiss, which can potentially be annoying. It does also hit the Lando Eye, which otherwise has a pretty free switch in to Galvantula. This thing's job's just to break a little bit from the special side. Of course, I got Aero to break from the physical side, so pretty solid mon. Really good choice of mon, I think, this week. And Scarfing it does mean I outspeed pretty much everything that's unboosted, so hopefully I can put in a little bit of work. I may lead this. I either lead this or Hydreigon, potentially. Or I potentially lead the last Pokemon on my team that has yet to play a game. And that is going to be Mamoru the Kangaskhan. I am going to do this a little bit out of order because my showdown thing got a bit messed up. But yeah, running Assault Vest, Adamant max attack, max HP. I didn't see the point in running speed on Kangaskhan because a lot of his team outspeeds me even if I am max speed. Opted to run double priority, which is something I've not really run this season. Priority is not really something I've put a lot of focus on. But Stab Fake Out from Kangaskhan hits incredibly hard. Don't see the need for Scrappy this week because he doesn't have a Ghost type, so Inner Focus is just there to prevent me from flinching. It is actually pretty good against the Togekiss, of course, as Air Slash flinches. are physically impossible against me. So, Fake Out hits Fake Out hits his whole team pretty hard. Ice Punch is there, obviously, of course, for the Latios, as well as things like the Togekiss. Sucker Punch is there to revenge kill. Rock Slide is actually a pretty good move against his team. Does hit things like the Ninetales really hard. Does hit the Rabombi, of course. Fake Out plus Rock Slide actually one-shots Rabombi, and Rabombi doesn't really do a lot. So if he does have Rabombi, I'm most likely going to lead the Kangaskhan set. And then just basically keep it to constantly fake out the opposing team. That's pretty much what we're focusing for with Kangaskhan this week. Kangaskhan's a really solid answer to Togekiss in my opinion, because obviously no air slash flinches, and with the Assault Vest of course I live most hits pretty comfortably. Alright, next up we're going to go back to the correct order now. We're going to bring in of course Florges, Bluebell. Bluebell's been pretty solid for me since I've had it in my team. I'm really glad I picked it up. Running it more offensive this week, so Calm Mind, Moonblast, Giga Drain and Defog. Defog's mostly there for rocks. I don't really want rocks up with my Galvantula and my Aero there, because they both take 25%. So, if he does bring rocks on his Mew, which I do expect to come, I've just got Defog on floor just to get rid of them. But otherwise, Calm Mind is pretty much easy for me to set up on a lot of his team. Moonblast hits a lot of his team, and Giga Drain is a decent little bit of coverage there. I may replace Giga Drain, but I don't think I need it. I could just run like Leech Seed, because the only thing he has that's immune to Leech Seed is Lilligant. So, we will see. But I like this set quite a lot. Giga Drain does hit quite a fair bit of his team, so I'm quite happy to have Florges running offensively this week. Of course, does suffer on the physical side, but that's okay. I can play around that, no problem. And last but by no means least is Old Faithful for me at the moment. I seem to love using this thing offensively, and that's Moonduck the Cresselia. Running another Calm Mind set. Pretty much the reason I'm running mostly Calm Mind sets this week is because I can potentially set up and outlive his special offense pretty comfortably running Calm Mind sets. Moonblast, Psyshock, Ice Beam hits pretty much his entire team. There's not really anything on his team that doesn't want to take any one of these hits. So if I can set up 1 or 2 Calm Minds, it's going to be pretty scary. Going to be pretty powerful as well. Modest max special attack, max XP means I can guarantee I can set up a couple of Calm Minds. Leftovers give me a little bit of recovery each turn, which is always very nice. So one thing you're going to notice, and I briefly mentioned it before, finally Infernape is not coming to a match. I brought Infernape the first 7 weeks of the season to mixed success. It did win 5 of its 7 games, but didn't really do much in either of them, apart from one game where it picked up a couple of kills. Infernape has an absolutely awful matchup this week. It's bad against the Lati, bad against the Rabombi. Can be particularly bad against the Mew, depending on what set he brings. Keldio's a really solid check, and things like Scarf Togekiss can really keep Infernape at bay, so I decided not to bother with Infernape this week. Infernape just doesn't do a lot. It does obviously beat the Lilligant. If he does bring a Suncore, I can actually run against it. But other than that, it doesn't really do enough for me, so I opted not to bring it. Other than that, Tentacruel was originally on my team as a relatively decent Keldeo check, but to be honest, Tentacruel didn't really offer enough offensive pressure, and that's something I'm finding with Tentacruel, is I do kind of want to look at bulky waters and maybe make a free agency swap, or maybe trade with a player to trade. So if you're interested in Tentacruel and you're in the GPL, hit me up, let me know. I'm definitely interested in moving Tentacruel on. Things like Registeel. Registeel is okay in this matchup. It can take on a couple of Pokemon pretty well, but again, being weak to the Keldeo doesn't really do me all that good. I don't do a lot of damage back to it. He does have a couple of mons that are really good against Registeel, so opted to not run with the passive playstyle that Registeel tends to offer. And the last mod on my team that didn't really come, that had no real chance of coming this week, was Mudsdale. Rather amusing fact, every week that I haven't brought Mudsdale, I've actually lost, so that's kind of funny to me. But yeah, Mudsdale had a pretty weak matchup this week. Mudsdale, of course, is really good against physically offensive teams, not so good against specially offensive teams unless I run things like Assault Vest. And if I'm running Assault Vest, I don't live a lot of hits very well. I can't run Rocks or Toxic or anything like that on Mudsdale. So Mudsdale didn't really have the best situation to come this week, so Mudsdale didn't come. But yeah, that's going to be it from me. That's going to be my team this week. Let me know what 6 down below you would have brought if you don't agree with me. But yeah, I'm going to get on out of here. Look forward to the battle coming real soon. My name is Rabombi Teacher. I'm your coach of the Royal Bomber for Bombies. Stay safe, stay awesome. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.